Okay, and welcome to our weekly RV Life Pro product training and Q&A. Today, I definitely want to emphasize the Q&A. We need your questions. We've gone over virtually everything I can think of here in the last several weeks, and we've got a few weeks more of this weekly show. But without your questions, it's kind of dies on the vine a little bit. We run out of topics, or we start regurging old ones, and that's good for new audiences, but we definitely need some feedback. What do you need to know that you're not getting from the videos on our channels, or documentation or whatever? So remember, this is every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. You can and should subscribe to the RV Life YouTube channel so you can be alerted of these broadcasts and other new videos when they're posted. We're also showing this on the RV Life Facebook page. So I've got a couple of things to cover specifically, and then we'll hope there's some questions, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to go in and share a screen right away. Something came up this week that was kind of a big deal. First, I'm going to share this screen, but I'm going to switch over to this tab. So if you haven't already heard, of course, the big RV news is Yellowstone is shut down. Um, Based, as you can see from this picture, all over the park, there's roads like this that are just disintegrating, falling apart, um, very precarious. There's folks trapped inside. Nobody's getting in from the outside until these rains and things. And even if the rain stops right this minute, I mean, you can see there's some real problems here. So this is a kind of a crazy situation, but it did get me. It did remind me about a feature that we haven't really spent any time on with RV Life Trip Wizard, and that is the um, public lands view. I think is the best way to say that. Public lands layer, I think, is the actual term. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to turn off the driving radius, just as a little bit of a less of a distraction. And of course, I've got our ever popular Mount Rushmore trip here, but with the focus somewhat on Yellowstone a little bit, I'm going to turn on the public lands layer. And what you're going to see this do is highlight a bunch of areas in this yellow highlight, right? And as I can poke around in here, I can see, here's Rocky Mountain National Park. Okay, cool. Down here we've got, I can't even read it, Black Sin of the Gunnison National Park. Of course, as we're talking about Yellowstone, let's go ahead and find that. Let me zoom out a little bit more. And we've got Yellowstone. Now, we're going to turn on campgrounds here briefly, and I don't have any filters selected. But why would I want to know this, or why would this feature be handy to me? A couple of different ways. Primarily, two specific that I kind of think of and want to talk about. Number one is from the standpoint of, whoops, I didn't want to zoom in that far. Zoom out one more notch here. Number one is from the standpoint of knowing exactly where a national park is, both from a driving standpoint, where can I expect entrance gates, where can I expect that property to officially be badged as that national park. And then the other, of course, is campgrounds. Do I want to stay at a campground inside Yellowstone, or do I want to stay at one outside Yellowstone? And if so, what is considered close? Where, if somebody says, well, you'll never get a campsite in Yellowstone during peak season. Well, okay, what's near Yellowstone? I can take my Toad over there, my Jeep or my truck, and I can drive in and out of Yellowstone, spend the day there, and come back to camp. And so this feature we have on here will help. Now, for those of you that have trips planned to Yellowstone right now, you may be scrambling to see where else you can go. Particularly if you've got a reservation inside the park and you don't want to burn the whole journey, maybe you can go see something else, right? But where can I stay outside of Yellowstone? And potentially these folks that are in Yellowstone right now, when they do get out, they may, they're going to want to know, hey, where can I go, right? Um, so this feature is really handy. It is just a layer you turn on. It also will stay there with satellite view if we switch to that, and I'll do that just real quick. And it turns kind of a wild orange, but it's ruby, kind of a grapefruit orange there or something. But anyway, it's really nice. It's just again, it's a feature to say, if somebody says, well, I'm buying a park pass and I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to stay inside the park. I've stayed inside the park at Mammoth Campground. Um, but the other reason you might want to know specifically is because there's going to be different rules, right? National park lands are national park lands, and there's different rules. You're going to want to follow rules about dumping and travel and firearms and all different stuff that pertains to a national park land. Where, if we look at this border here by Gardner, right outside the park, there's these three campgrounds that would not necessarily have to conform to those rules and laws and things like that. So again, this is just another feature that our amazing dev team has said, hey, this would be cool to show people. It's also a really neat way to find places to go that you've never been. I was a little bit marveled by this. I've not spent I've been to Yellowstone, but I've not spent any time here west of Yellowstone as far as camping goes. And I was kind of intrigued by this Craters of the Moon National Preserve, right? And it got me poking around, looking at the campground. I looked at some details here, and it's really neat. You can see all the black rock there. Um, this is a another great reason to take good photos and use them with your reviews, because I can see here it says traveling by fifth wheels and extra long trailers not recommended beyond this point. So, this would be something to say, hey, if I want to stay here, I need to investigate it a little bit more, right? I might go to the features and, it says big rig access. So, okay, that's good. But based on this sign, I need to um, probably plan which campsite I'm interested in and that sort of thing. The other rabbit hole this thing got me going down is additional layers. So I went here and turned down, I turned off the national park layer, and I went to the terrain map because I kind of, with the whole craters of the moon thing, I was kind of interested in, well, what does that terrain look like? And you can actually see as we look at some of this stuff, um, we show some terrain on the regular map, but this is a little bit more focused. And as we've talked about before, we could look at this now from satellite view, right? Zoom in on that campground. I don't go too crazy here. Just kind of see what that's like. Looks like a big entrance area. It looks well set, and then at some point in here is that sign that says, hey, you can't go there anymore. And obviously we can bring out street view, and we can get a little bit of a look at that campground. There's that entranceway. Looks like it's gonna, yeah, Craters of the Moon entrance. So great features. Again, all of this stuff's built in for your trip planning pleasure. But I wanted to bring some of these features to your attention today. The other thing here is, as we're talking about the terrain and the landscape, is that within that journey, we can also bring up our elevation. In this case, I would have to add this to my trip, which we could do real quick. And now I've got a route there. And so now I could see on my elevation, where this thing fits in the realm. I want to do show entire trip, not open trip. And we'll turn off our campgrounds again. And so now I've got this extra leg of my journey from Mount Rushmore out here to Craters of the Moon. And we can see it might be a little difficult to see, but Of course, if I move it with the mouse, you can't see it. If you'll look around this section right here, where my mouse is, you'll see that orange donut kind of, it might be a little difficult to see, but that corresponds with what I'm highlighting down here on the elevation chart. And you can see that once I kind of leave the Yellowstone area, it doesn't dip much. There's not a ton of terrain. Obviously, with the terrain map, you can see it's fairly flat. And then we have that gradient, and we can see that nowhere on our journey are we dealing with anything above a 2% grade, except for some little hill down here early in the journey, maybe a 3% grade. So we just kind of today, the whole Yellowstone thing wanted me talking about focusing on some of those features, the national park feature, terrain, elevation, grade, that sort of thing. Another quick topic, I'm just going to jump out and see if we have any questions yet. Nothing yet. Another quick topic is just a new feature that those with Android phones should be seeing really soon, if not already. I kind of lost the timing in my head, but the ability to save your downloadable data, your offline data on the mobile phone on an Android device to redirect those saved map data segments down to an SD card. People have been asking that for a while. It's just like everything, it's just a process to dev that out, get it done. And I think the team, they were testing and may have it done. If not, you'll see it very, very soon. Maybe a notification on your phone, perhaps, or a what's new in the RV Trip Wizard screen. But anyway, you'll have that real soon. So we wanted to touch base on that. All right, if you've got questions, now is a good time to ask them. And I am going to bop down and look at my notes to see if I've got anything else. One of the comments we had was we wanted to see some more advanced features as far as the training and the lessons go. And that's terrific. But I think I've covered pretty much everything. We had a pretty big session on the date locking, which was kind of an advanced thing that we get a lot of questions on. We've had fairly long conversations about the fuel and how that works, and adding campgrounds, using the different styles of the driving radius, kind of the as the crow flies versus the actual advanced radius, using hours instead of miles, campground filtering. We've talked a lot about that. We've talked about filter stacking. We've talked about unmatchable filtering pairings that don't go together. So we've really kind of dug in. We've looked at long trips. We've looked at short trips. One of the things that I had on my mind to talk about today was the round trip option, and we've talked a little bit about it, but we'll hit it again today. So if I look at this trip, I don't know why I keep clicking that one, show entire trip. You can see we're leaving Florida and going to Mount Rushmore. Of course, now we're going to Crater of the Moons or whatever the place is called. Yeah, Crater of the Moon. But ultimately, we probably need to get back home, right? And there's really 3 ways you can get back home. Number one, I could just manually create a route going back. 99% of the time, that's what I'm going to do because I just don't want to go the same route I drove if I can help it. If I'm looking at this trip and I want to come back, I'm probably, and if I'm really going to the Crater of the Moon, I'm probably going to come down through Salt Lake City, right? Maybe come down and I think if it was me, I'd come down through Vegas, come through Flagstaff. We might hit Grand Canyon again, come through Albuquerque. Or if I've not been this way before and I'm brave, I might try to take the 10 all the way back and bring it across. If you've not taken the 40, you might want to do that. If you haven't taken the 20, the goal is for me, what way can I come back that I haven't done a bunch of times? I want to see new scenery. And so You know, for me, looking at this trip, if this were really me coming back to Florida, which I'm not in Florida, but if I were, I might want to take this 15 through Salt Lake City, which I haven't done yet. And I have taken Vegas and 40 across. I might want to come down and come through Phoenix and take the 10 all the way across. Whatever. The point is, I would manually build myself a route the same way I built my initial segment or my initial journey of the trip. That's one way. The second way is if I was lazy and I just wanted to take the same exact route, I could pick round trip options and I could just mirror my stops back to the starting point. And it would just automatically create for me a trip that mirrored my initial stop. Or I could do, and I'll tag this one on just to see what it does. I could pick a direct route back to my starting point. So if this case, let's say I took this journey in the direction I wanted. You know, we wanted to go through here, we wanted to go through St. Louis, we wanted to go through Devil's Tower and Mount Rushmore and both and around Yellowstone, the drill blank there, and Crater, all this stuff. We chose this on purpose, but now we just want to get home, right? We've done our vacation, we've done our journey, we took our time, 31 days, and now we're just like, all right, we're done. We're going to get back. So I might choose round trip options and direct route back to starting point. And let's see what that did. And of course, there it did. It created a direct route. Now, because I chose that route, it didn't add any campgrounds or anything like that. And you can see that there's still a lot of overlap here. So I'm looking at that. I'm like, no, yeah, that's just not the way I want to go. So I could come delete my final stop here. And I'm back to where I was, where I could manually create that route coming home. Either way, the point is you have three different options really to build a route back. And it's something you kind of think about as you're creating the journey. You know, you might say, look, I want to get to my special destination faster and build a trip that focuses on getting there as quickly as possible, then spend a bunch of time at your ideal destination, wherever it is. It might be the beach, it might be the mountains, wherever, and then take a more leisurely return route in some places that you're not in love with or you just haven't been before and you're not really interested in staying there, but you'd love to pass through, get an eyeball on how things look, and maybe plan a destination there in the future. So again, it's just all about the planning, which is what the whole tool is designed for. Um, okay, this is a great question, Annette. Is why can't there be an undo button? And we've talked about this before, and I think it's something that we are working on and plan on looking at further. So, in the one sense, if I jump to, and if I jump to the map real quick, if I add a stop, I can easily undo it. Like this Craters of the Moon I just added, if I was to undo that, I could just click the trash can and get rid of it. And the same with a waypoint. If I was to drag a route, and I could do that real quick here, and drag route, and if I just grab a segment and drag it here for some reason, and decide, okay, I want to do that, and then go, oh, you know what, I don't want to do that. I can delete this little trash can, and I will undo it. Having said that, an undo button is a great idea and is something we're looking at. You know, undo one, undo last 3 steps, undo last 4 steps, something along those lines. I think we'll see it. I've heard them talking about it, and it's a good idea. I don't know what's involved, what the technical lift behind that is involved, and how much, you know, do we start tracking with cookies, and how does that work? And then again, that's out of my zone, and but I think it's being worked at, and I think it's a great idea. Um, So this comment, so yeah, this is being addressed, Annette. I think we are going to see at least one of those clicks drop away. That's something also we are looking at, and that is, um, and that is having to click several different ways to open a trip. Again, some of that, what drives that type of a change is figuring out how to do things that are touch friendly on mobile and tablets without having to deal with pop-ups. And so that's where some of that comes from. It is being looked at again because you're not the only one that's not a fan of having to tap multiple places. So we're definitely looking at Annette. Thanks. And really this kind of the same point, whether it's an undo or a redo, that's kind of the same thing. The thing we have to remember here is we're dealing with a web browser, and so the forward and back has different connotations. We just have to be careful with how can we implement that without the browser thinking we mean go back or go forward, right? It's just an extra technical layer that our team is more than capable of. So we're looking at it, right? Here's a great question by Janet. There's not much connectivity around Yellowstone and some other parts of the country. What do I do if I need to deviate from my planned trip and have a lean internet connection? So one of the things we can do here is if we'll go to the mobile phone in a second. Obviously, when we're looking at Trip Wizard, this is really the planning aspect of the tool, right? The intent is for you to plan ahead and have a trip ready to go on your mobile device. So let's jump to that for just a moment because there will be times when suddenly things change. The Yellowstone is a great example. What if I'm in Yellowstone and it's like, I got to find a new campground because they're shipping us out. You know, they're controlling traffic. They're getting us out of here. It's an emergency situation. How do I find something? So that's an excellent question. So why don't we do this? Let's jump to our mobile device. Hold on, I got to fire up one more little screen here. And there we are. Okay, so let's stop sharing that one. And let's share our phone. And I'm going to hide Janet's question again real quick here just to make some space. So if we think about the trip we were just working on, and you can see it's when I go to trips, it automatically is refreshing it, right? But if I find that Mount Rushmore Devil's Tower trip right here, so here's my entire trip on the phone. Now, as you can see from the big red button there, I have the option to download data to my mobile device or a tablet. Now, a tablet comes with a very large caveat, and that is your tablet can't be used for navigation unless it has its own GPS chip, which means it has its own cellular data plan. If you just grab a tablet from the Apple Store, from Amazon somewhere, and you don't buy it with a data plan like you have for your phone, it's not a GPS tablet. It's not going to work the right way. But if presumably if I have that, or obviously my mobile phone, my Apple or Android device, I have a big red button here that says download maps and RV routing for the trip. Now, the misnomer here is it's not just maps. If I tap on that, look what else you're getting: parks and reviews and offline map. So if I come down to, of course, this is a giant trip spanning multiple states, and I just added, if I take that Wyoming right here, 366 parks, 9,211 reviews, and the offline maps. If I have downloaded this to my mobile device before my trip begins, when I get into that situation, if I lose cell phone data, I still have a GPS chip that's talking to the sky, right? It just needs to point to a map somewhere on my phone. If I've downloaded that data ahead of time, it says, ah, cool, there's a map. Here, let me show you some stuff. And we can find a campground and we can get routing even if we have bad or no internet through our mobile provider? So, fantastic question. For those that want to know, obviously this trip is huge, covering multiple states. It's a boatload of data. That data is manageable. If I was to leave this section and go to my more in my profile, and I would go to, it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to more and I wanted to go to offline storage. Here's where I can control that later on. And by controlling it, meaning I could download particular states ahead of time manually if I wanted to. And likewise, I could delete data that I didn't need anymore. So if I took that big giant trip and which downloaded like 10 or 12 states, whatever it was, I got home, everything's great. Well, I'm like, I don't need that data on my phone anymore. I could go in here manually, like you can see here with Texas, and I could tap on Texas and choose to remove it. Or I could manually grab these states, or um, you know, kind of an odd use case for this that just popped into my mind is, let's say I'm taking uh, I'm renting an RV, right? We're going to fly into Myrtle Beach, or that area, and I'm going to rent an RV and I'm going to tool around and then park somewhere on the beach. I could manually come in here and download a state that I needed, and South Carolina, North Carolina, wherever I'm going in a general area, and I could kind of have that data on my device handy already. When I'm navigating, I don't need to do anything special to call out and use that data. It's just if it's there, it uses it. If it's not, it doesn't, right? Nothing I need to specialize in. So, excellent question, and I hope that was very useful. Let's take a look at this is a good this is a great question. Annette, you're just loaded with great questions today. Regarding the app, why don't the graphics shown on the trips mirror the most recent trip? Yeah, so this is actually being looked at. I don't remember the timetable. It's coming soon. So the image there has been updated, like it's like once a day it gets updated. Um, and initially the image is meant to be a simple placeholder, but what we're finding out, and what we found out, is that image is a great visual cue and a differentiator between your various trips. And so it's like when we're looking at that, we want the confidence that it's been updated. And even though the trip has been updated, the image has not been. And that is coming, a change to update that much more frequently. Perhaps every time, I don't know exactly, but much more frequently than it is now, so that that image also reflects the changes in your trip. So um, excellent question, Annette, on that. While we're on the app, and if you've got more app questions, fire those away. While we're on the app, um, everybody has a different way they look at things and perceive things, right? When I look at a trip that I want to take, my first inclination is to tap that picture. And I see the data, I see all my stops. There's the craters of the moon we just added, right? It's there. And I know that wherever I'm going next, I'm going to press the red arrow. It doesn't really matter where I am. Um, I just press the arrow and I go. Uh, if we circle back a little bit to Janet's point, let's say I'm in the middle of navigating this trip, right? And suddenly, and let's say I am at Devil's Tower, right? Or I'm wherever, and I see that, hey, I can't go to Yellowstone now. What can I do? How can I change my trip? Well, I probably can't, and I could. I probably don't want to log into Trip Wizard on my phone and try to monkey around and find a different campground and add it to my trip. There's a much simpler way. I could do it, and I've seen people with the dexterity on a phone that it just blow your mind. And they log into Trip Wizard and the little browser, and they go in there and tap, 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 and they build their trip and add stuff and do whatever. But you don't just have to do that, right? We've got a couple of other options for you if I want to find an alternative campground in the middle of a trip. Number one, stop your navigation, get back to the main menu here. And I've got a couple of choices. Trip Wizard's, the RV Life app, RV Life app Pro app is automatically going to show me campgrounds that are nearby based on my current geographic location. So right now I can see, okay, I'm in Roanoke. It's balmy 89 degrees. And here's the campgrounds that are near me. So if I was just literally pulled over on the side of the road thinking, hey, Yellowstone blew up, the roads are closed, the traffic's jammed, whatever's going on, we just need to find a campground now. I can use this and I could find a campground. I could, when I tap on this, Hickory Creek, I could call them, I can look at reviews, I can look at photos, and I can just straight up get directions and start navigating there, right? So that's one way. If I go back to that menu, these are nearby. These are within a few hours, etc. Another way I could find a campground that I need right now is to simply use the map. And right now I don't think I have any filters on. And you can see the blue dot represents where I am right now. And of course, around it are campgrounds that are around me. If I wanted to go ahead and filter some of those, say, look, there's two things I gotta have tonight, which is 50 amp and big rig access and pets. Okay. Those are the, I might have far more criteria when I'm planning a big vacation, but right now, those are the three I gotta have so I can sleep tonight. And then now I can see these campgrounds that are near me. I could tap on them. Maybe not Paradise, right? Texas Motor Speedway is great when there's events. I don't think when there's no event going on. Yeah, North Lake Village. This looks nice, right? It's 2 miles. Whatever. The point is, I can find a campground if I pick that North Lake, and I can go to my details. I don't even have to go that far. If I just decide, yeah, that's the one, I can just hit navigate right here. Typically, though, I'm going to go ahead and choose a campground. I'm going to look at the details, get some reviews, try to get some pictures, maybe go to their website, maybe make a phone call, whatever I need to do. But ultimately, if it's there I decide to go, I'm going to navigate. So having this data on my phone for the states I'm traveling through is important for that reason, because you could be in an area with terrible or no reception at all. My kid and I got stuck on turnpike going through Oklahoma for 4 hours, literally in the middle of nowhere. And if I would want to have my data available if that were me, if I were stuck in that scenario. So um, anyway, so that kind of circles back to uh, what Janet was sort of alluding to is having a way to pivot and make a change to your trip if you needed to in a pinch. Um, okay, so with that, let's see, we talked about that, Annette. We talked about this. We're working on that. Thank you for that. This is a good question by Alcinda. So as far as how much space on your phone this data takes, there's a couple of ways we can look. If we were to let's go to a little bit simpler trip just for perspective. Let's look at this one. So this covers one, two, well, it's not that much simpler, but when I hit download, it doesn't tell me the space. Let me take you here. Let me back up and show you where you can see that. If I go back to more and offline storage, here's where the numbers are. I was thinking it might group it there for me, but it doesn't. But here it shows me exactly how much space it takes in megabytes. I just tapped Kentucky. Let me turn that off. So when I look at this, I could start adding stuff up. The first 4 might take up a gig. The second 4 might be a gig. So, I don't know what the whole US runs. You generally don't need all that. But let's say it was 20 gig, right? So the question is, how much space do I have on my phone? Well, let's take a look. And everybody's different. So this is something you want to know. Frankly, I'm not even sure I know where it is anymore. iPhone storage. So I've still got 200 gig available because it says I'm using 51 out of 256. So I think we can get swayed by the numbers, and I think that just the trick is to know how much you have available and then go look at the states you want to download and grab them. Now look, if you're really tight on space, you could manually, rather than download the whole thing through that trip menu we just looked at, rather than do this, and I can turn off individual ones. So as I'm leaving for a journey, I might only pick the first state, right? And then grab the others as I go. As long as I can get some decent Wi-Fi, either campground Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi or whatever, I don't have to download all 2 or 3 or 4 gigs at one time. I could piecemeal it, but the burden then is on me to remember to do it. But again, it's just we're trying to give you the maximum flexibility you can have so that this will work. Not everybody has a brand new iPhone 13, right? If you've got a 7 or an 8 or 9, I'm not even sure how far back we go before it doesn't work anymore. But at some point, if you're tight on space, you can manage this if you do it carefully. And probably if you are that tight on space, you're already used to managing it pretty carefully. So anyway, you have the tools to do that there. This, I will answer this online, and that because it's a good question. If the, I would say this, if you're seeing, and this holds true for any type of unusual behavior, if you're having unusual behavior that doesn't seem to be getting resolved through normal methods or whatever, delete the app and reinstall it. In this case, deleting the app would also delete that downloaded data. So don't do it while you're on the road. Do it when you're and have some good Wi-Fi or something. But completely deleting the app and reinstall it might be a good thing. There's constant versions of the apps being provided. The team is working, it seems, nonstop to add features. And especially if your phone's set to automatically update, it kind of happens behind the scenes, right? And so we're our phones may be doing some secret update we don't know about, and we decide, hey, I need to go to airplane mode, or I need to turn it off because of this or that thing. And all of a sudden, we turn it off in the middle of an update, and it should pick up and fix that on its own, right? But who's to say it does every time, right? So, kind of the old adage with apps on the phone: uh, uninstall it, delete the app, reinstall it, and Annette, let's see if that causes those images to refresh um, at a faster rate. And that's true whether it's just oddball behavior that's unexpected, that can't be explained, can oftentimes be attributed to just a corrupted install or a corrupted update. It's usually not anything we've done. It's usually just that behind the scenes updating that you don't really know when it's happening, and you just never know when something's gonna puke and you don't know what's happened. So that's really a good question, a good statement, Annette. Um, Let me bounce down to this one first, real quick. Uh, yeah, if you decide you don't wish to keep this data later, which you don't really need it, right? Um, is I can when like if I finish a trip, let's say we finish this AIM rally, and I go to Trip Wizard and I archive the trip and I don't need it anymore. Well, do I need this 8 states of data we crossed getting there? Not really. So I could go to more, and I go to my offline storage, and here is where I could then delete. You can see I have Kentucky. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to Kentucky for a good while. I don't need to tie up this data. Let me delete it. Now, I will say this. If I've got 200 gig free, I'm not worried about 263 meg. Um, doesn't mean I need to keep it here. I'm just saying we don't, know your phone and decide how important this is to you. But if I decide I don't need Kentucky, I can tap on it, choose remove, and it'll burn that data and, do its thing. I don't know how long it takes. Yep, there you go. So now Kentucky's gone and my phone is free. So a good touch, a good question, Alcinda. Let's see. Janet's got another interesting one. Can my husband use the same account between two accounts? If so, how can he see the trip I planned? Can I share my trip with kids? Kids, huh? Okay. Just giving Janet a hard time. So these are some really good questions, and I'm very thankful for them because We don't get enough of these kind of questions. So, first of all, look, we don't we don't want you guys to buy two accounts, right? The only thing you've got to do is have a Trip Wizard account, an RV Life Pro account, and then just make sure you stick with that email address and password to get into Trip Wizard. And when you're in the RV Life Trip Wizard itself, that only one person is in at a time. In other words, don't open Trip Wizard on a second browser, a second computer, a second whatever. When it comes to the RV Life Trip Wizard component, have your email, have your password, use it one person at a time. Now, when it comes to the mobile uh, device and what we're looking at here, which is your RV Life Pro, you can log in, your husband can log in, your dog can log in, it doesn't matter. Just everybody needs to use the same credentials. So if you have it set up on your account and your husband wants to keep track, or vice versa, wants to keep track of the navigation or look at the trip data, and they want to log in on their RV Life mobile, account as well, the mobile device, they download it from the App Store under their own credentials, but when they log in, they need to use your credentials. And that way, you guys are looking at the same data. It's okay to be looking at a trip from that read only sort of a window view as many times as you want, as many people as you need. When it comes to using the data and creating that trip, we only want to do that one person at a time on the computer side of it. Now, if you want your kids to know where you're going, um, they don't need to load up a mobile device and track you in that fashion. There's a much simpler way in RV Life Trip Wizard. Let's do that real quick. Whoops, that ain't what I want. Let's go back to our Trip Wizard screen. We've got a couple of options here under the share, and they've actually have been updated this year. I think we touched on them earlier in the year, but let's look at them again. Let's address first the kid question. You want your kids to know where you're going to be and when, right? But you want it easy for them because they're kids and they hate doing everything. So we're going to click on the wrench icon, and we're going to go to share, and we're going to choose visitor view. Now I get two options here, a public link and a private link. As you can see, the private link shows street addresses and things that your children might want to know or whatever. The public link, that might be something you share with friends or share with maybe on social media or something where a lot of that data is kind of sanitized, so you're not letting the whole world where you're going. Even then, you got to be careful. You let somebody know you're going to be away from the house for a month. Well, that's problematic, right? So, but as far as the kids, either one of these links will do. But if I click copy private link, it essentially just copies a link to the clipboard. But if I email that or text that to them, they will get essentially a free view of my trip exactly as it appears here in Trip Wizard with the data on the left. They just won't have any way to manipulate it, add to it, create trips, any of that kind of stuff. It's just a view. But I can send that to them. I can email that link to them. I can text it to them. Um, and they can keep track or know where we are. If they're watching the house and they want to get a hold of you, they'll know exactly where you are and what day. Uh, Another option here is if you're collaborating with, say, a group maybe that's traveling to a rally or something together, and you all have Trip Wizard accounts, but you kind of want to build it together and kind of talk about it together. You can share your trip. We'll choose this other option called share trip with another Trip Wizard user. And if you put in their email address, now it has to be an email address that they have signed up for Trip Wizard with, and send it to them, and click send, they will get a notification via email, and then that trip will appear in their tentative trips. So they can now look at what you're doing, where you're going, where you're staying, what your route looks like. And they may be taken a different way, but you might want to intersect and get together for a couple of nights somewhere on the way. And you may not even be going to the same destination. It may just be a pair of some full timers that are out and about, and they want to sort of plan together and manipulate their trip so that they can cross over and spend time together. So that is another great way to do it. But again, you have to know their Trip Wizard email address. Simple rule of thumb is if they didn't get an email, you didn't get the right email address because they're going to get a notification that says a friend has shared a trip with you. So that's a great little tool. Obviously, the visitor view we just talked about it is handy. Let's look at Janet's shotgun load full of questions. Um, yeah, I think we got them all. Well done. We talked about this one already, so we're good there. So some excellent questions there. You know, there's a lot of things built in here that um, until you need them, you might not even know about them. We've talked a little bit about GPSs before, and we have an option here called Export Trip. And you can see I can export a trip to a calendar. I can export it to a spreadsheet. We got a lot of diehard spreadsheet gurus out there. I can export a trip for use in like a third-party GPS unit, like a Garmin unit or something like that. It's there's some caveats to that, and in that you have to, of course, it creates a GPX file that you then have to shoehorn or import that into Garmin Basecamp on your computer, and then from Garmin Basecamp, you've got to get it into your GPS head unit. It for me, it's just more trouble than it's worth. I'd much rather just pull my phone up and the trip's already there, right? And I just navigate with the phone. If you're vehemently opposed to navigating with your phone, then this might be a good option to do. The other option is, of course, just crank it to a spreadsheet and each day punch those numbers into your RV safe GPS in your motorhome or whatever it is, your truck. And then we should qualify that motorhomes often have an RV safe GPS. Your truck doesn't. It's going to use Google Maps or Apple Maps or something. And so your truck isn't going to have that. Now that the app will do CarPlay, Apple CarPlay, we're seeing tons of folks, of course, just take the trip as we did on the mobile app, then start the navigation, plug it into their truck, and then it pops up on the Apple CarPlay, and they're using their head unit in their truck to navigate with the RV safe directions and the trip that they created on the phone. I do want to jump back to the phone for a second. If I've spent a lot of time crafting and going over my trip in Trip Wizard, and I've created my stops and my rest areas, my fuel, and I've vetted locations with elevation and grade and satellite view and all the stuff that we've looked at. When I go to navigate that, I want to navigate it exactly the way I planned it. And so when it comes to navigation, hey, before we jump to that, let's look at Annette's comment. She reinstalled the app and the graphics look good, and we'll see if they update properly going forward. And I think we'll see a more rapid update on that, Annette, but great to hear that just simply uninstalling and reinstalling fixed it. The reality is with mobile devices, that's just kind of the way it is. Sometimes you just got to delete and reinstall. Let's go, reminds me of Microsoft Office back in the day. So let's stop this share, and we're going to pull that phone back up. And what I wanted to stress here was that, if I'm just ad hoc navigating, right? I pull this up, I pick somewhere, there you go. I'm going to get all these little choices here, and I'm going to view RV safe directions, and I'm going to get maybe multiple choices, maybe not, depending on where I'm going. But it's going to sort of decide where to take me, right? The same could be said if I pick a campground here and I decide to navigate. I can turn on and off a few things, but it's going to decide where to take me. Well, if I spend all that time fine-tuning the trip I want to take and the route that I want to take and all the nuances of the trip I created, I don't want it to decide new stuff for me on the fly. I've already vetted the bridges and the locations and the entrances and the exits and the fuel stops and all these other things. I don't want to go a different way. So when you do navigate a trip with RV Trip Wizard, you go to trips, you pick a trip, and we start navigation. Let's see, this is not, I got to think about this a minute. I need a local trip, I think, because I'm not in that area. Here we go. And so I want to match my trip route exactly. I don't want to allow changes to my route. Um, the the only time I might want to choose that is if I was in a segment like this and I knew, say, I had a great use case for this, but um, where I might want to, a good example would be, say, going, I use it a lot, but going through Atlanta, right? Let's say I have a path through Atlanta for my planned trip, and I get up to Atlanta, and there's uh, bunch of traffic or a road closure or something going on. I might choose allow changes to route so that it gives me some choices that I can now make on the fly. But 99% of the time, I want to follow the trip I made exactly. So I'm going to choose match my trip route exactly. And you'll notice when I do that, it doesn't give me the option to avoid ferries and avoid this and avoid that because I've already decided that on my Trip Wizard trip. Now I'm following it exactly, and that's what it's supposed to do. So that's just a little bit of a nuance. The other thing I had started to talk about earlier was, by default, I want to tap on this picture and I want to go. But sometimes, again, we all think differently. We all look at these things, and our first inclination is, well, I'm going to touch the little, when they're stacked vertically, we call it a hamburger. When it's stacked sideways, I don't know what it's called, but here's my option: view trip, manage trip, start directions. So, but the problem is, what if I don't want to start from the first stop? Well, I end up going to view trip. Well, guess what? That gets me to the same place. So we've had some folks ask, say, look, it always makes me start from the first stop. And I look at that and I go, well, that's impossible because when you go in, you get to choose. Well, as it turns out, they were actually hitting the hamburger. And of course, they were only getting start directions from the first stop. So just another one of those little nuances that crops up. So couple of things there that we got on a little bit of a sidetrack, but there's so many layers and so much nuance to that. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was the match the trip exactly. It makes no sense to plan your trip in depth in Trip Wizard and then not choose that option. Um, when you're ad hoc navigating, that's a different story because I'm going to pick something, and if there's the potential for multiple routes, it's going to present those to me. I'm essentially ad hoc navigating, and I want the opportunity to decide to take something or not take a certain way. So I can get out of here. Yeah, here we go. If I'm taking a route, um, I want the option to say, avoid traffic or avoid highways or unpaved roads or whatever, because I don't know where I'm going. In other words, I've got a trip to a destination that I didn't plan ahead. I didn't vet with satellite. I didn't look at it with Street View. I'm essentially blind, and so I might want some of those options that the app will give me. Whereas if I've planned it heavily on Trip Wizard, I've done all that homework already, and I don't want deviation. So, um, something we've seen a lot of, and we've talked about, and it's just good to know. And of course, in Trip Wizard, those settings are going to be at the trip level. So for this trip, we're back to our Mount Rushmore trip, for example. When I go to my trip settings, I go to my routing and driving, and here are those options that I can choose. Um, we've talked about avoid tolls, avoid highways. Avoid tolls can be problematic. We've mentioned that before, because some roads, like a national park entrance. We talked earlier about Yellowstone, and there's some big roads going into Yellowstone proper. Well, those are a paid admission, so that's a toll to get in. So if you have avoid tolls, you might not get in there. We've seen it in other areas similar. Same thing with like a ferry. We have avoid ferries here, but let's say you need a ferry if you're in the Northwest and you don't have avoid ferry selected, but you have avoid toll selected. And it says, hey, I can't take you on that ferry because it's a toll. So just be careful with avoid tolls. We've seen some cities that have high occupancy lanes that you have to, you have a window sticker, one of those radio reader sticker things, and it's not really free. It's a toll, but there's no booth. They just grab your sticker and charge you in the mail. Well, if you're driving through and you don't have one of those, it's going to catch your license plate with a camera or something. But in some areas, that's considered a toll road. And so if you have avoid tolls selected, you might get diverted around a very fast and efficient route. So uh, bear those in mind. And that's why they're also selectable on a per trip basis. And if you're getting routed strangely, if you're looking at something going, why in the world am I getting routed that way? Come back and look at your exclusions. The other thing we've mentioned frequently is look at your RV. Did you accidentally put 86,000 pounds instead of 36,000 pounds? Or did you put 14 feet as your height? Or did you get it backwards and actually put 35 feet as your height instead of your length? And you're getting this crazy routing. Come back and look at your settings. Make sure they're correct. Because it's things like that that can give you a crazy route. Yeah, I didn't really change anything. It's there are multiple times, and I did one. I saw one just this week. Somebody was getting routed off of Highway 80, which of course is a huge, big freeway, and then back on. And there was some exclusion or something they had inside their settings that was taking them off the freeway for that section. Because when we tried to mock it up manually, no matter what I could do, unless I go to a crazy height or a crazy weight, it just says, yeah, the most efficient way from Cheyenne to North Platte is 80. So those are all things you got to look at if you're getting a crazy route. Make sure you put in the right settings. Okay. Enough rambling there. We've got no more questions and we're at the top of the hour. So knowing there's a minute or two delay, we'll put a last call for questions. If you're watching this after the fact, it will be found on, of course, the RV Life YouTube channel. But if you want to join in on this broadcast on Wednesdays at 11 Central, be sure and bring those questions, bring the things you don't understand or the things you want clarity about, bring them to the broadcast and ask them. Great job by Annette, Alcinda, and Janet today with excellent questions that kind of help keep the conversation going. And, I think of things throughout the week. I ping our help desk and they tell me things to talk about. Occasionally things come up, but, we're now in probably our 12th week, March, April, May, June, we'll probably our 12th week in a row. So we've covered pretty much everything. We will do, just for the record, let's get the calendar open here quick. 1, 2, we're going to do 2 more weeks. And then we've got a 2-week break, and then we'll pick them back up again for a while. I'll be unavailable for 2 weeks. So I will post something, however, with a date, the same thumbnail I've kind of been using for the post, but I'm going to post it with a date specific and a reminder to gather up those questions so that you have plenty to ask when I return after that break. But anyway, we'll be here for the next 2 weeks for sure, and then probably a 2-week stop after that, and we'll pick it up and run probably till the end of August, and that's going to be about it for the summer probably. So bring your questions. What else do we need to know? Anything else? We'll see if anybody else has any last minute comments other than thanks. Thank you, Alcinda, appreciate it. So that's a wrap. We'll see you next week at this same time, 11 a.m. Central on the RV Life Trip Wizard YouTube channel and the RV Life Facebook page. Ciao. Thank you.